I don't have that talent. Like, I can never think of anything original.
Right.
It takes me a while. That was a gem. They're not all that cool. A lot of them are named after my dogs or my kids or something around the house. I'm like, Northwood IPA, because that's the street I live on.
Gosh.
Cool, Jake. Way to step out of the box.
If you're going to name beers after family, you better be real careful. If you pick like a bitter IPA and you name it after your wife, like it's going to be a problem. She'll be like, why this one? Oh, it's very
floral and sweet.
Yeah.
Because you're flowery and sweet.
You're flowery. Why does nobody like that one? I mean, I don't know. IPA is an acquired taste.
Are you saying I'm an acquired taste? You're married to me and you're off the market.
Yeah, you're reading into this.
Hey, look what's on TV.
I'm going to go back to the garage. Got to record some noggin
notes. Is that Property Brothers? Here, babe. No, we can't afford that kitchen.
You're describing my life. My wife is not listening to this, but if she was, she'd be like, wait, who just said that? Which one of them? Go back to the camera on this one. Oh, man. Well, Jake, you are a fascinating guest, a good therapist, and apparently an award-winning brewer. Yeah, so far. So we have set expectations at the ground level for our listeners. The good news is, if you say anything that's even remotely usable, they will be freshly surprised. Yeah. There you go. They do not turn into the show to get actually good advice. So today, guess what? Today's going to be a stunning day for everybody. But with that, I think that we can actually jump into our listener mail. And Mr. Tangeman, why don't you kick us off with our very first question?
Okay, here we go. I'm curious what makes people end up with abusers again and again. I grew up in an abusive household and then married into one. Ever since, it seems no matter what I do, every person I date ends up being horrible. The first person was a few years after I left my ex-husband. I settled for a nice guy thinking that was the answer. He said dating me was like something out of the 50s. I took it slow. Everything was perfect until suddenly, one day, I wasn't allowed to hang out alone with my girlfriends in addition to a bunch of other crap. It ended when he said it was him or my cat. Goodbye. I didn't date for 3 years and then met this amazing guy. Things were great until a few months later, he got drunk and started yelling at me. Then that relationship ended. How do I not go there ever again and actually pick a normal human being?
So first thought on this one, Nick, she said that there was a guy that whenever he was dating her, he said it's like being in the 50s. Maybe he meant the 50s in Saudi Arabia. You know, you got to be clear. He could have just meant like, I don't want you talking to anybody and, just stay here and don't drive and wear this trash bag. So you just got to be clear. You got to ask these questions. But so wow, that's a fascinating question. And, I draw the line whenever it's me or I have a Chihuahua named Pumpkin. And that's the hill I'll die on right there.
Absolutely.
Don't ask me to choose. Okay, that's my third child, so that's impossible choices. But Jake, I imagine you've seen people like this, people that have a history of abusive relationships, but then notice that they just, through no fault of their own, or so they think, they are repeating this process where they end up with very similar people. It's almost like a template, and it's confusing. What do you make of that?
So coincidentally, Noggin Notes may or may not have a podcast on abusive relationships.
Excellent cross-promotion. Excellent.
Which
will be available on our Twitter.
The second installment of which will be coming out, I think, this week.
We're going to edit all this out.
Yeah.
Jake never appeared.
That's right. These guys were just laughing a lot. There's like no third person. Yeah. So give us a taste of what some of that content will be.
So what really jumps out at me, and through my filter, I see every person I date ends up being horrible. And I fundamentally don't believe in horrible human beings. I think human beings are good by nature. And I think our environments tend to take us in directions where our behaviors then become undesirable. So I would jump on that language. It sounds a little judgmental, but I get where they're coming from. So I think that the pattern is such that I'm going to go Carl Jung direction here. I'm kind of a Jungian guy at heart.
I'm anti-union.
Well, that's fine. Local 457. Jungian, Jungian. Carl Jung. He's a pretty big name in our field, and he died in 1961, but his work lives on. And part of what he said is that our ego has become this judgmental term, and it's not. It's very neutral. It's just the most familiar place of our awareness. So what we know best we'll tend to gravitate to. So if it's what you know, you're gonna be drawn to it without usually knowing. So nobody raises their hand and clears their throat and says, I'd like some of that abuse.
Right.
But if it's familiar, it feels like home. And so you tend to go back into those patterns. So this is where the awareness building comes in. If you can become aware of that, then it's easier to choose differently. The problem is it's hard to look at oneself because it's very scary, because you have to look and see things that you may not want to notice. And so this pattern, I would submit that probably there's some signs. There's probably some red flags. I don't imagine that it's quite as binary, meaning either or, all or nothing, as it's being laid out here. Is everything is perfect. Everything's a very extreme word. All, nothing. Everything is very extreme. I don't think everything was perfect until suddenly one day I wasn't allowed to hang out alone with my girlfriend.
Hints.
No doubt. And so that's the type of awareness I'm talking about. If you can step back and neutrally examine, as if you're a disinterested third party, just looking at transactional relationship between people, you probably see everything's not perfect. And what happens is that ego tends to clear a path for your reality to reconcile actual reality while overlooking a lot of really red flags.
Right.
So if you were to bounce that off as somebody who's been watching that the whole time, they go, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? And that's the scary part. You go, ooh, I don't want to see that, because that's a reflection on me and my ability to choose, or judge things or discern. So that and then later things were great until a few months and he got drunk and started yelling at me. I'm not buying it. I don't think that
things were not great. He was probably hints.
Totally. Or he maybe you got duped.
That does happen. I mean, there's such a thing as being catfished, but the thing I kind of hear you saying in your theme there is, I guess some would call that re-traumatizing, that I'm kind of reenacting something that I've gone through in the past, but you're using this word but it's familiar to you.
It's home. It's
home.
And I say comfortable, meaning it's predictable, not that it's comfortable and pleasant. But we see this in cycles and patterns of all sorts, from substance abuse to relationships to just somebody like me who has 2 master's degrees and couldn't leave college, apparently, because that was home. Now, looking back with the education and insight that I have, I look back and go, ooh, I was attracted to campus because campus was comfortable and familiar to me. Right. It wasn't going to get me out into the work world unless I made the very scary step away, letting go of what I thought I knew well and embracing, I don't know, big question mark. So not having something to grab onto is very terrifying.
Right.
And if you're not good at tolerating the emotion of fear, you're not going to invite it in.
Familiar.
And mystery is very, very scary.
Yeah. So I was kind of thinking, because I see this a lot in addictions treatment when we talk about like family roles and how people create an identity based off of the role that they had growing up. So, for example, the oldest child kind of taking on that family hero role, that becomes part of their identity, is that they see themselves as, I am the helper. I'm the one that people have to rely on. Right. So then as they get older, they become an adult. What kind of relationship are they going to be attracted to? They're not going to be attracted to somebody. Help. Exactly.
Wow, that's really true. My wife and I are both firstborn in our families, and that's exactly it. That's so interesting. And my little sister tends to be, as we look at her dating history, she tends to end up with people that are, second or third child in their family.
Well, yeah, and if I'm an adult and my whole identity has been set around me helping other people, then people who don't need help are not very attractive to me. Right. If I get into that relationship, then what do I have to offer?
That's interesting. And the writer here talks about, I grew up in an abusive household. So I really hear that both of you are kind of humming back to this concept of, listen, you're reenacting some of this past history of brokenness because it's what you grew up with. And it looks like it just falls out of the sky to you, but a therapist would put all these little data points on a graph and start connecting the dots and then trying to challenge what you like and look for in other people.
And I would stack onto that the notion that when one's identity becomes such that they seek these things out, challenging and leaving that identity is scary because it leaves you identityless. So if I'm I'm a firstborn also, and I do happen to be a caretaker. I like helping people. Clearly, I'm in this profession and I'm sacrificing lots of my personal time to do public service. So stepping away from that and being okay with letting go with somebody else having control. I've learned to delegate. That was very tough for me. I've had to learn to let go of some stuff and delegation. that's tough for me because I have to let go of the role that I need to be in charge. So somebody who's a caretaker, somebody who's a scapegoat, all these roles that we learn about from family systems courses, they'll tell you that role isn't necessarily permanent. It can be changed, but stepping away from it is very, very challenging. And so consider, for example, the role of a parent who has a sick child. If that child gets healthy, it almost leaves the parent identityless, which is frightening because you're stepping into I don't know what you're stepping into. So learning to embrace mystery, I think, is very, very important in our clinical work as well.
So at the end of that question, I read the writer saying, how do I not do that again? How do I pick a, quote, normal human being? As therapists, we usually don't love the word normal. But you know what? I do like this question because what I kind of hear in Jake's answer and I kind of hear in Nick's answer, it sounds like the synthesis of our advice on this is probably, can we begin with some self-examination? Can we try to connect these dots of your past relationship history, imagine where this comes from? Does it come from, what I grew up with? Is it familiar to me? And if that's the case, am I ignoring red flags? Am I seeking personality traits that seem natural to me, but actually are the warning signs of somebody who might be pretty unhealthy and might not respect me or give me good space? So good answers, guys. I really appreciate it. This is nice. It's nice having a true MFT on the program here because now I don't have to make stuff up anymore. Next question.
I feel like people are going to know that we've been imposters this whole time.
Well, yeah. If they watch our video on podtherapy.net, they'll see that you just got anointed with a clinical professional counselor license. And so, yeah, they were going to figure this out. This has all been a sham.
So going to Jung again, that would be called a persona projection. It's a mask that you wear to cover up the fear inside.
Oh, my gosh. All right. Next question. This one is a good one. And this is actually I want to read this one. This one's really interesting. How can I cope with hair pulling? I have trichotillomania. Whenever I feel an episode coming on, I open a note on my phone, which has coping lists of activities. I choose one of these from the list, and I replace my urge to pick my hair with that activity. This list is what works to keep my hands busy. Here's my list. Number 1, epilate leg and armpit hair. Here's my list. Number 1, I'll pull my leg or armpit hair. Number 2, I'll pet the dogs. 3, masturbate. 4, eat a snack. 5, take a shower. 6, do a short exercise. 7, deep breaths. 8, paint my nails. 9, bake. 10, meal prep. Or 11, work on an art project. Or 12, watch YouTube videos on a playlist. Is this a good way to cope? It's working so far. Will I have to use this for the rest of my life? What else should I be doing? Good question. But we should probably start, guys, with what is that very interesting sounding word? And Nick, you were helping me pronounce it earlier.
Trichotillomania?
I always pronounce it trichotillomania.
Trichotillomania.
I don't know.
That's how I
actually don't know.
I know they call it trick for short. Those who are, so there's actually a very thriving community. So for the listener, trichotillomania is obsessive and compulsively pulling hair from your body, and people that have this might break the follicles of their hair, and you might notice that their hair is short or unhealthy, and they might be removing it from their scalp. And it's a compulsive behavior. It's something they can't stop themselves from doing. It's very similar in that way to addiction, Nick. That you don't seem to know why you're doing it. You tend to go in autopilot. But before we bring it to the table here, one thing I love about this question, and I'm going to tell you right now where I think this question came from. This last weekend, over Twitter, we got followed by a lovely artist named Liz out in the United Kingdom, out in Britain. And she is a huge advocate for this population. She lives with this, and she has come up with amazing ways to cope. And the way that she copes is wherever she is in the world, if she feels the urge to reach up and pull her hair out, what she will do instead is she will pull out charcoal paints, and she will graffiti anything she can get her hands on. So she'll grab a newspaper, and she'll just draw on it. And this has become this sort of live performance art that she'll do on the subways, and then she gives that portrait to whoever's standing next to her, and people started filming her doing this. And now she has like tens of thousands of people that follow her just to watch her do this, but she brings a lot of attention to this population. She followed us over the weekend, and so I think this is probably a question from one of the folks associated with her tribe. And we're so grateful to have you. And what a great question. Jake, when you take a look at that, coping skills, making a list, having an app on her phone, kind of sounds a lot like Noggin Notes kind of stuff. It
does. And I don't want to stifle anybody's creative talent. I want to lead with the idea that if it's working for you, don't quit. That being said, I am of the opinion that I'm not into symptom treatment. I'm into problem resolution. And I think a large part of what we do as clinicians is we diagnose